It's my privilege to welcome to This Week in Virginia, Delegate Josh Cole. Joshua or Josh, I don't know which you prefer, but
either one is fine.
Either's fine. Representing the 28th House District. Back in the day, maybe 2005, according to what I'm told, you were appointed by Speaker William J. Howell to be a page in the House, but along came the invitation from the governor's office, and I believe you maybe became a governor's page at that time. And then only 14 years later, elected to represent the district that Speaker Howell had represented for so many years.
Yes,
so it's and you are certainly a native of the area, having spent your growing up years in the Fredericksburg, Stafford area. And back in some of your previous experience, you served on the Stafford County Public Schools Superintendent's Equity, Diversity, and Opportunity Committee. Mm-hmm. But what we want to talk about is some of these assignments that you've received in the House of Delegates by the Speaker. For someone who is as junior a member, as I might say, as you are, that you have certainly risen right to the top, appointed to Commission on Youth, Rappahannock River Basin Commission, Martin Luther King Commission, and any other number of commissions, and also then the Autism Advisory Council. So we really want to give you an opportunity to tell our viewers some of what takes place in these commissions or councils, because most of their attention, as you know, Delegate Cole, is directed toward the session. Yeah. 46 days, 60 days, special session, whatever it is. But much of the work is done on the commissions. Yeah. And certainly start with any one of them, whether it's Rappahannock or Martin Luther King or Commission on Youth or Autism Advisory Council, where you've just been elected by commission members to chair that commission. And then I'll make sure we get you a chance to talk about each of these and other matters too during the interview. So thank you for being our guest.
Mr. Bailey, I appreciate it. This is my second time on This Week in Richmond, and I'm always elated when we receive an invitation to come and chat with you. I have been honored to be appointed to some awesome commissions. And, you know, when we get started in the House of Delegates, the Speaker typically is the ones that assigns you to your committees and assigns you to your commissions. And the first couple of committee assignments I got when I was in the House, I was a little confused as why in the world I got assigned to public safety and agriculture and natural resources. But the Speaker has a keen eye on where people need to serve. And serving on the Agriculture Committee, I got to see that our district is, you know, we have rural, we have farms, we're right on the Rappahannock River. She appointed me to that. And then we got appointed to the Rappahannock River Basin. And that was actually the first commission that I was appointed to that actually got to work right away. I was appointed to that commission in January, and by March, we were already having our first meetings. They produced one of the bills that I worked in during this past General Assembly session dealing with the Rappahannock River, making it a scenic river designation. So it was already designated as a scenic river all the way down to about the Fredericksburg area. But we picked up the bill in accordance with the commission. We met throughout the year. We talked about a few agenda issues. And one of the ones was we want to make sure that the Rappahannock River, that scenic designation was carried from Fredericksburg all the way down to about, I want to say maybe like Richmond County, somewhere down there. And so we came up with HB 1819, taking that 79-mile portion that hadn't been designated, picking it up and designating it as a scenic river. And so when we're talking about commissions are not just made up of a bunch of legislators that are just thrown on this commission to deliberate and talk about issues, but we're honored to have citizen members who typically are subject matter experts, local elected officials who get assigned to these commissions. And we talk about issues, we raise up concerns, and it operates just like an actual committee during the General Assembly. We have hearings, we have, governors, executive board groups that come and make presentations to tell us about different things. And then we get to work and we talk about what we want to see done, what legislation we want to see introduced during the General Assembly. And we pick which one of the legislators are going to carry that legislation. And then we make sure that we get it passed once the General Assembly is in session.
Well, I tell you, that is a tremendous example of what happened in that one commission. And,
Yes, sir.
and I think a commission on youth is one that you were named to and serving. We've come through a time when most of those commissions could not meet person to person, only meet virtually. I guess I saw Amy Atkinson this morning. I was walking to my office, and I think that she's looking forward to the opportunity in the near future to be able to have that commission meeting face to face.
The Commission on Youth was one I actually had applied to a couple of years to get on. Unfortunately, I didn't make it in then, but I was able to make it in this time. And we've been meeting virtually. I think the Commission on Youth was maybe like my second commission meeting to meet. And the Autism Advisory Council was the first one we've had in person. But Senator Dave Marsden is the chair of the Commission on Youth, and he's been doing a great job making sure that we can meet. And we have a few, I want to say maybe 1 or 2 more meetings before the end of the year so that we can finalize our legislative agenda to submit to the General Assembly.
Now, just very recently, when the Autism Advisory Council met, Delegate Ken Plum nominated you, and by acclamation, you were elected to chair that council. And we have a picture that we're going to show on the screen later, showing Senator Hanger, who chaired it for a significant length of time, handing the gavel off to you. And so that certainly is another area that you have of service. And from sitting in on that meeting and the public testimony that you received, you've got some heavy lifting to do, and that probably more than can happen in just a few months before the session, but a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah, we definitely do. And I think what people fail to realize, when we talk about our friends and family members who may be on the spectrum, I think that we also fail to realize sometimes there are adults who find out, that they have been diagnosed. I had a friend just last month who reached out to me. They text me and said, "Hey, I'm having a hard day. I hope that you pray for me. I was just made aware that I have, been diagnosed with autism." And so we're finding out adults who are, finding out that they're on the spectrum now, and making sure that we have resources available for them. But as you said, when you were at the meeting, there were so many parents who came in the public comment section with their various concerns, whether it's our friends on the spectrum dealing with police officers, or dealing in the public school system, or making sure that first responders know how to handle them. There are general, actual concerns that we need to make sure that we're uplifting. And so not just taking a look at insurance, but also making sure that people in the community are made aware, of how we handle our friends and neighbors, making sure that we treat them with the same respect they need, and making sure they're giving the same opportunities as everyone else. And so our citizens in the Commonwealth with disabilities, we need to make sure that we're helping them out and that they're being heard, because they can bring their own issues and their concerns. And we need to make sure that they're heard when they're brought to us.
From that experience that you just had, I imagine you would give the word out to other people watching our show that they should contact their legislator. They should contact someone if they have just recently received that diagnosis, and reach out to you and to the members of that Autism Advisory Council to be able to learn about other resources that the Commonwealth would have available for them.
Yeah. I think one of the closest interactions I've had was just a couple of years ago, when one of my cousins was diagnosed. They were still a little bit early on. And so how to deal with that, and watching our family come to grips with that, making sure that we could support. But definitely, if you all are watching this today, or you have friends or family members who have not been having a positive, interaction in Virginia, you can reach out to me. I'm sure Mr. Bailey will put our contact information in the chat.
Yes.
Thinking this is a live Zoom, but in the show, so that you can reach out to us and we can see what we can do. We want to hear from you. So when we post our next 2 meetings, we'll have 2 more meetings before the end of the year. And when we have public comment, we want to hear from you, your stories, your concerns and issues, so that we know how to craft legislation to introduce it.
And we will get that contact information. And also one of one of the positive things that came out of this COVID experience that legislators that you all been dealing with is that you are able to receive testimony, live testimony from someone who's back in their hometown.
Absolutely.
It's great to have people come and look you in the eye in the General Assembly at the meeting, but it's really great that you got so much good testimony from people who were scattered around the Commonwealth and were able to be seen on the screen, and they could, and I'm thinking that this probably is one thing that might be continued on in the future to allow some of that testimony that way.
Agreed. I think that's going to be very key, especially as you're moving forward into the future. You have so many people who want to drive down to Richmond during session or when these committee meetings are happening, these commission meetings are happening, but they just don't have the opportunity to. And so by allowing them to Zoom in or submit their comments publicly, that gives us a wider area, a greater level of accessibility to your legislators.
Now, what about some of your other commissions? You're working on one that has to do with slavery, a broad one on the Martin Luther King Commission. What word do you have about what's happening in those commissions?
So the Martin Luther King Memorial Commission, we deal with a lot of things as it relates to the historical preservation of African American and the history in Virginia. And so one of the key things that we just did for this past session in 2021, one of the things that the General Assembly passed was removing the bird statue on Capitol Square. And the Martin Luther King Commission voted and approved and sent it over to the General Assembly that we would create a statue honoring the life of Senator Yvonne Miller. And for those of you who know, Senator Yvonne Miller was the first African-American woman elected to the General Assembly and then went over to the state Senate. And so it's my hope, and that was my suggestion on that commission, that her statue would replace the bird statue on the Capitol. So we're waiting to see what's going to happen, but we did get the monies in the budget to create a statue. The next decision is where we're going to actually place that. And so also now with the brand new commission that was created by Senator McQuinn, the commission to study slavery and the effects of African Americans from that, throughout the history. We've had our first meeting just a couple of months ago, and we're scheduled to have another meeting within this month, I believe. And there's some amazing, amazing people serving on that commission. And so I'm really looking forward to getting into the nitty gritty and getting the work done on what we can do for economic stance to help the African American communities out.
Okay, Cole, I need to dig through the archives and provide you and our viewers a link to a show that we did probably 15 years ago. Senator Yvonne Miller was the guest. She was a great person, and people who didn't have the opportunity to know her need to read about her and learn about her. And I've got all kinds of stories I could tell, but we won't go into that now. But she was just such a tremendous friend. And when she spoke, everyone listened. Yeah. And she spoke with a soft voice, but with strong words. And people listened, even if they didn't necessarily agree with her, they listened. Now, any other commissions before we maybe talk about some legislation and other matters? Any other commissions that you would mention that you're serving on? You've got quite a list.
Yeah, there are quite a few. I think there's roughly about 6 that I serve on. There's one that I'm serving on that I'm just there to learn and grasp information and to see what I can do, but it's the pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders, PANS, or associated with streptococcal infections in pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome, or PANDAS. So
I thank you for saying it. I wasn't sure I was going to tackle that. Yeah.
So it's the Advisory Council on PANS and PANDAS. And I've had roughly 2 meetings there. And of course, some of the parent citizen members have really been educating many on us on what we need to do to help out as far as insurance and just care for our youth with those disorders and making sure that we can help them out. And so I think, like I said, it's roughly 6 commissions that I'm on. And I'm really excited to get to work. And many of them, believe it or not, the Rappahannock River Basin Commission and the Commission on Youth have been the ones we've been working on, the hardest and had the most meetings. But some of these are just getting started. And so it's my hope that we have at least 1 to 2 more meetings on each of these, that we can effectively produce a legislative agenda for the General Assembly when we come back in 2022. But one thing is key: when we're serving on these commissions, there's so much work we have to do. And I know people get caught up in, the politics of the General Assembly, but there are real nonpartisan, non-political issues that everyday people need help with. And you need key legislators in Richmond that are going to fight for everybody that's listening to what their citizens are saying, having an open door to let their citizens come in and talk about it. And even as me as a legislator, if I don't know everything, at least I have the ability to sit down and listen. And if a parent comes to me and says, hey, we need this done, that I can take it to one of these commissions, or the commissions can bring it back to me, and we take it to Richmond and we fight for it to make sure we get those things passed.
I want to reach back to when you began serving, that one of the issues that you really championed, you along with Senator DeSteff from Virginia Beach, in which you heard from parents, and you were representing little children who don't have a chance to vote. And that the work that you did, along with the senator, the two of you working together across party lines, across chamber lines, but working on behalf of those parents and those children, that little children might be able to afford hearing aids. Yeah. And that was certainly a breakthrough. It had powerful forces. We won't go into all of them, but it had powerful forces working against us. Yeah. And people wanted it to be studied some more and figured out. But I think that the two of you stuck with it in each of your chambers and got that through. And along the way, I learned the powerful personal testimony and story that you had too, as well as one from the parents. But on behalf of all of those who benefited and are still benefiting for that, we certainly thank you for that.
I appreciate that. And one of the things I think is so amazing was the grandmother in that story. For my bill, my House counterpart to the Senate counterpart didn't pass. It was sent to the study. And I remember the grandmother, I came out of the committee. I think we had, like you said, some powerful testimonies. So I felt empowered standing at the dais. But then when they sent it to committee, I kind of felt defeated. So I came walking out of the room and I was like, well, we'll just have to see what we can do. Maybe we can look at next year. And the grandmother said, no, we're not waiting until next year. We still have that Senate version, and we're going to get that Senate version passed.
Right. Yes. And when it did, and then it came back to the House did back off from its previous position, which again is a rarity, because typically, if a chamber defeats a member's bill, they don't treat a bill politely that comes from the other chamber. They figure that we'll do the same. So that you and the senator coupled together really did some great work on that. What about any other legislation that you'd want to mention? Certainly, you've already mentioned one about the Rappahannock River, but any other legislation or legislation, perhaps, Delegate Cole, that you're even mulling over and considering and working on for the session that's not that far away?
Yeah, January will be here sooner than we know it. And as for me, serving the Fredericksburg area, thinking about, growth is a major factor in our region. And with growth comes traffic. And so I had introduced a bill last session dealing with regional transportation authority. And we pulled it back. There was some contention there, and I think there needed to be some heavier conversation. And so I've been having those conversations with our local transportation committees, and even some other legislators in the area who weren't really aware of what we were doing. And so we're committed to making sure that we can find ways to generate funding in the Fredericksburg region, so that when we go to introduce projects to the SMART scale, we have something to bring to the table. We know that the Fredericksburg region is like number 3 for growth in the Commonwealth. But as it relates to transportation funding, we fall to number 5, because when we come to the table, we don't have anything to bring with us. And so we really want to make sure that we're finding ways to generate our own funding so that we can be competitive with Northern Virginia, with Hampton Roads and the Richmond area when it comes to our transportation project. We've had 3 years in a row where reports came out that the traffic between Washington, D.C. and the Fredericksburg region is the longest commute, the most expensive commute, and the most hectic commute in America. Yes, that means even behind LA, ahead of LA. And so we really want to make sure we're finding ways to tackle those issues. And then we had a wonderful bill, HB 1905, this past session dealing with financial literacy. When I was growing up in high school, we didn't have a financial literacy class. And there are some schools now where are making it mandatory, but we just wanted to make sure that all across the board, students throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, whether they leave out of middle school or they leave out of high school, they're having the opportunity to have a financial literacy class that touches on everything: job opportunities, job types, whether it's gig work or, whatever work it is. We want to make sure that they're fully aware of what they're going to get into when they step into the workforce. And so I was really excited. That passed unanimously out the House and the Senate, and it was signed by the governor, and it went into effect on July 1st. And so we're really looking forward to empowering our students as they go into the workforce to know what they can expect.
That's so critical. And I know that, as you said, some school systems were already doing it. I think I have a grandson maybe who benefited in his school, but it wasn't really statewide.
Yeah,
it was not happening. It wasn't happening. Delegate Cole, the people in Fredericksburg and Stafford County know you, but people around the Commonwealth may not. If they know their own delegate, or perhaps even their own senator, they know that you all have, these jobs are part-time, that you have other work, and yours is somewhat unique among members of the General Assembly. Not only you, but unique in the fact that you are associate pastor of a church, and also serve with a clergy group too. So you're kept busy with that part of your life. And perhaps the question that I'm trying to get to is how does that intersect positive or does it negative with your work as a member of the General Assembly of Virginia?
I think it does both.
Yeah, right.
One of the things I always talk about, and I do believe in separation between church and state, but one of the things I always talk about is the reason I do what I do. The reason why I fight for the legislation that I fight for is because I'm constrained by my faith. And we know it's a golden rule across every major religion that you treat your neighbor as you would like to be treated. But for me, one of the words that I always remember is the words of Jesus when he said, "What you've done to the least of these, you've done to me." And so when I think about voting on legislation, my question is, how is it going to impact the least among us? The single mother working 2 jobs and going to night school to make herself better with, her 3 kids at home, or, our citizens with disabilities living in the Commonwealth of Virginia. How would these legislation impact them? Or maybe some of our low-income families that are just trying to make it by. These bills, these legislation that we are passing, how is it going to positively or negatively impact them? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, there are citizens who live in the 28th district who don't even know what a delegate is, who doesn't even know who their representative is. But I can rest assured when I lay my head down at night, I fought for legislation that would make their lives better. And so that's why I do what I do. But of course, sometimes politics can get a little messy.
Right.
So I have, some religious colleagues, who may be a little far left than I am. And so, we get into little spits and spats here. There are some clergy colleagues who are a little bit more conservative than I am. And so we have our little spits with each other, our spats with each other. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we still respect each other. And I think we have to make sure we're looking at that as we may have our tribes. We may be on the left, we might be on the right. And one of the things I love about Richmond is, even though we may take these videos where we do our house speeches and we may over politicize things, at the end of the day, no matter what side of the aisle you're sitting on, we eventually come together to work for the betterment of the Commonwealth and make sure that our citizens are doing better.
Well, it is a challenge that you wrestle with, I'm sure, and that every member of the General Assembly does, regardless of what their faith may be. But to have those values intersect in a positive way, what takes place in the General Assembly. Well, before our time would be up, the committee, Education Committee has got to be one that you really enjoy, as well as Chesapeake Agriculture and Natural Resources, still serving on public safety. Are there any meetings that you see coming up of any of those committees during the interim, or is their work really relying on the commissions and the councils?
So typically what I've done, before I got started, I did a little bit of research, and typically what I find out is that the Agriculture Committee will typically have like a kind of like a retreat in the middle of the year throughout the summer. And that was actually postponed. We were scheduled to have one, but that was postponed due to the pandemic. And the Education Committee typically will have one. And we did that virtually, where we learned some information from VCU and a few other schools. And that happened, I want to say, last year. I don't think we did one this year. But typically, sometimes some of the committees will meet randomly throughout the year just to get some information so that we know what to do when we come together for the General Assembly. And so maybe not this fall.
Yes.
But we do that. Sometimes the committees do meet throughout the year just randomly for information's sake to see what we can do heading into the next session.
Delegate Cole, before I thank you and the show ends, let me give you a chance for a final word. What can constituents, yours and constituents of all your colleagues around the Commonwealth, what can they do to most benefit you and those who represent them? What would you like for your constituents to do? I'm sure some of them are doing it, but what's the most positive thing that they can do to be helpful?
One of the things I think is key is I always say an informed voter is an empowered voter. And so when I'm talking to constituents, I always let them know, hey, there's so much that I can do for you. There's so much that I can do that sometimes I don't even know I'm empowered to do it. But when we have communication, I love having relationships with the constituents that reach out. There are so many people who didn't know I was their delegate until after I got elected. And once they found out who I was, they keep in touch with me. They'll send me a text message or they'll reach out to me on Facebook and say, hey, delegate, this is what's going on. We would love if you would show up to this meeting, the Rotary Club, or whatever civic organizations, the NAACP in Fredericksburg and Stafford. Some of them reach out and just say, hey, would you mind coming and listening to what we have to say? Or could you come and just give us a legislative update of what's been going on in Richmond? And so maybe you don't have a group, but maybe you have concerns. Don't hesitate to reach out to me or your delegate or your state senator and just say, hey, this is what's going on in our neighborhood. This is what's going on in our community. And as our delegate, we want you to know about it. But also, more importantly, as our delegate, this is what we want you to advocate or we want you to fight for. It's so key that you have communication and a relationship with your elected officials so that you can see your community change for the better.
That's a great closing message. Thank you very much, Delegate Josh Cole, for being our guest on This Week in Virginia. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey.